Hello everyone, my name is Ian, you're watching Big Rock Moto, and thank you so much for tuning in today on this beautiful April morning. Now, Husqvarna says that they developed the new Norden 901 for long distance riding, long distance exploration and touring, and they're trying to set the bike apart from its sister bike, the KTM 890 Adventure and 890 Adventure R. So the question is, have they been successful in their mission? Well, to find out, I've been racking up more miles on this bike, and I just got back from a 1,000 mile, 4-day camping trip with the Norden, and today I'm going to tell you the good and the bad about the Norden for long distance touring. So when Husky decided to develop this bike, the way that they wanted to set it apart from its KTM siblings was obviously one, the looks or the aesthetics of the bike, which if you didn't tell somebody this was based on the 890, they probably wouldn't know because the bodywork looks so much different. They've also done things to, in their opinion anyway, improve the comfort. So they've changed the seat, they've changed the windshield. The bike also has a whole different headlight and lighting setup. It also has a different dashboard, and there are a few other small changes, but they're not dramatic differences from the KTM 890. So why might you choose this versus the KTM, and what makes this good or what makes it bad for long distance touring, especially compared to the KTM, which I've also owned? So let's cover the really good, the really positive parts about this bike for long distance touring. So let me start with sort of what they've changed from the KTM. Let's start with the seat. The seat is amazing. It's wide, it's supportive, it has a really nice material. It even has little ridges in it to sort of give you, I think, like extra ventilation or something so you don't sweat too much. But in any case, what you end up with is a seat that can support you all day long. Far too often, motorcycle manufacturers put on a very soft seat, which feels good in a motorcycle showroom, but once you ride it for more than a couple hours, you sink into the soft foam and you feel like you're sitting on a 2x4 and it's very uncomfortable. Not so with this bike. They really did their homework on the seating, and that's one of the big standouts with this bike, not having to spend $300, $400, $500 after you buy the bike on some sort of aftermarket seat. So great job, Husqvarna, on that. Let's talk about the ergonomics or the position of riding on this bike. I find it to be very neutral, very roomy, and very, very comfortable. In fact, I can't believe I'm saying this, but the ergonomics for my body type anyway and how I like to sit on the bike are more comfortable on this than my R1250 GS Adventure. I think it has something to do with the position of the handlebars, which by the way are fully adjustable on this bike with 3 different positions, front and back, and then you can also of course rotate them. So the ergonomics are very, very good. Now, one small change I did make was I went to a Black Dog CycleWorks foot peg, which is featured in my accessories video, which I will be publishing very shortly if I haven't published it already. And those pegs lower the pegs by about 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, and give me a little bit more leg room, which was very, very welcome. Although even with the stock foot pegs, I had plenty of leg room. Also, the seat height is not too tall. I feel I leave the seat in a low position. It's a 33.5 inch seat height. And although the seat is pretty wide, which kind of pushes your legs out a little bit, if you slide forward, it's pretty easy to reach the ground on this bike compared to a lot of other adventure bikes that I've been riding. Let's talk about the suspension on the Norden 901. So what Husky did was they went right between the KTM R model and the standard model. At the end of the day, I find this suspension is a very good compromise between on and off-road riding. On the street, it's plush, you don't feel a lot of the bumps. When you ride the KTM 890 Adventure R, you feel like every little tiny speck of dust in the road rattling through the bars, at least in my experience. This bike is not as stiff, so it absorbs the highway much better, little cracks in the pavement. It's very good and makes it more comfortable to ride long distances. Off-road, it is a little bit soft for really aggressive off-road riding, although I think it's going to meet the needs of 95% of riders out there for their off-road riding. So I like the suspension, and you have pretty good adjustability with full adjustments in the front, and then you can adjust the preload and the rebound in the back. Let's talk about the fuel range. So this is very important for touring because you don't want to be stopping for gas all the time. And here in the American West, we have very long distances between fuel stops. So with a 5-gallon tank, and I've been getting around 55 miles a gallon average, and that includes traveling at some 70 miles per hour or 110 kilometers per hour speeds. I think that's very good fuel mileage, number one, and it allows me to have a driving range of over 250 miles. So I can gas up anywhere between like 200, 230 miles and still have quite a bit left in reserve. I think that's excellent. I think it's a perfect size fuel tank without adding too much weight to the bike, but giving you enough range combined with the good fuel economy that this engine gets. So that's a huge plus. Couple other things that make the Norden really good for touring. Cruise control is standard. Cruise control is one of the most important things for me that I look for in any sort of bike that I'm going to travel on. Once you have it, you will never, ever, ever go back, allowing you to rest your hand on long distances and just maintain a steady speed when you're on long highway rides. So I will not own or not buy any more adventure bikes without it. It's just a really big problem, and it's one of the reasons that I ended up ditching my Yamaha Tenere 700. And even on the new T7, the World Raid Edition, they still don't have that. The other thing that makes this bike good for touring, and the final thing here on the good list, is it's really good at accepting luggage. So I ran the Tusk Olympus tank bag, I ran a tail bag, I run the Tusk Olympus panniers and the Tusk racks. It's pretty narrow, it looks good on the bike, it matches the width of the bike, they're very easy to use. The bike feels very well balanced with the luggage and still doesn't feel top heavy, even when I have my top bag on and all my camping gear for my trip. So very, very good at handling luggage, and it still feels very light and agile even with all the luggage added to it. So what are the bad parts about this bike for touring? What are the downsides? Well, I've thought long and hard about this, and I know this seems unfair, but I can only come up with one thing that I don't like, and that is the windshield. So no matter what I do with adjusting the spoiler, I've tried different size spoilers, I've tried putting it in all the positions, I've tried running without the spoiler, of course, there's just a lot of noisy wind hitting my shoulders and going into my helmet. I've tried different helmets. I've tried everything I can do without changing the windshield because there are no windshields available yet for the bike because it's such a new bike. And I still have just a very, very noisy, turbulent experience hitting my helmet. And this makes long distance riding very, very tiring, especially if you're traveling at speeds, I would say above 65 miles an hour or above about 100 to 110 kilometers per hour. It's just very noisy and it buffets my head and gives me a headache and makes me more tired. That's a big pet peeve of mine on a bike designed for travel is they did not properly test this bike in a wind tunnel or test it for wind noise. So you either need to get like a shorter windshield or you need to get a taller and wider windshield to put the wind over you or figure something out. But I will be researching this and trying out different options and reporting back. But that's the only thing that's holding this bike back from being like a superb, like 10 out of 10 touring bike, which would be really, really awesome because it's so light and so fun to ride, so much lighter and easier to ride than my big GS 1250 Adventure, that I would rather go on trips with this bike than the GS, honestly, except for that wind noise, which is holding it back right now. But otherwise, I mean, this bike is making my GS very, very nervous because of how good a touring bike that it is. So final thoughts on the Norden 901 for long distance riding. Now, a couple things. I have not tested the bike with a passenger because I don't ride with a passenger, and my wife is not riding at this point in our lives, raising children and everything. So I unfortunately can't report on that, although it looks like there's a lot of room for a passenger. And it does have a remote adjustable preload for the back, so you do want to tune that preload in when you're adding weight. I think if you were to add a lot of weight of a passenger and heavy luggage, you might need to consider if the rear shock is strong enough for all that weight. Even with the preload cranked all the way up, you might need a stiffer spring rate if you're doing a lot of two-up touring with luggage. But with that caveat aside, and the other caveat being that I only have about 1,500 miles on the bike and it's still early, I feel like, and I've traveled on all different kinds of motorcycles, adventure bikes, sport touring bikes, I've been lucky to own and test just about everything. This is very, very good. And I think Husky did a brilliant job of giving us a lightweight, mid-size adventure bike with a ton of power that's fun to ride, that handles well, that's still comfortable to take those long trips on. We just need to figure out the windshield, and then I think we will be good to go. Now, check out the rest of the videos I have on the Norden. I have a whole series of videos on this bike, and I'm filming also today the accessories and mods video. So the luggage, the heated grips, the GPS mounts, the foot pegs, all the stuff you see here, I'm doing a separate video. So either I've already published that or I'll publish it in the next week or two, but watch for that. Other than that, if you have questions, comments, put them down below. Please support Big Rock Moto, and there are ways to do that in the description. Otherwise, please ride safe, and we'll see you out there.